You just lost a lawsuit that could cost you millions. You still have a $10,000 warrant out for your arrest. Seems like a good time for Ammon Bundy to have a bunch of people over for a cookout. One wonders if there will be something served other than Bundy beef. Idaho has some of the strictest abortion laws in the country, but doctors complain they are also a bit vague, which is why there's a lawsuit over how they are worded. Well, one word specifically. We're taking you back to the 90s for a story that takes you back even farther than that. And we're meeting the people who took us on all of those Exploring Idaho trips. Well, not sure you have dinner plans for tonight, but if not, we know there's a big barbecue in Emmett happening and everyone's invited. Ammon Bundy, the anti-government activist and the only former candidate for governor with a $10,000 warrant over his head, put out the public proffer this afternoon by posting it on People's Rights Network. Lisa and Ammon Bundy are hosting a big barbecue at their house tonight. Come eat Bundy beef cooked on the Traeger and enjoy good weather and friends. Bring the whole family, they say. Come anytime, eat around 6. Not exactly sure what Bundy beef consists of, but I do know this open invitation has remarkable timing considering Bundy's beef with the law, and specifically the Gem County Sheriff's Office. We were told deputies showed up to his house a couple of times this morning to serve that warrant, but Bundy was nowhere to be found. And by the time they showed up a second time, they did find a couple of members of Bundy's People's Rights Network on the property, but still no Bundy, they said. So as it stands now, there's still a warrant to bring Bundy in for contempt, which is related to the St. Luke's lawsuit against him, but not because he hasn't shown up to any of the hearings or participated in any way. The warrant is for Bundy continuing to violate a protective order from the court to remove the harassing and threatening postings against St. Luke's employees from his PRN website. As for the lawsuit, St. Luke's was just granted a default judgment this morning by Judge Lynn Norton. As to what damages Bundy will be responsible to pay, well, that has yet to be determined. Judge Norton also ordered Bundy to respond to discovery, meaning he has to answer questions and provide documents requested, I should say, by St. Luke's Health System. She also ordered Bundy and the designated representatives for his campaign and the People's Rights Network to come in and sit down for depositions. And Bundy has to do all of this by May 24th. So it seems he's not going to get away with not answering to the lawsuit, which stems from the days-long protest Bundy and his PRN network staged outside St. Luke's in Boise, prompting them to go on lockdown for a couple of hours last March. Okay, so to recap, Bundy's lost the St. Luke's lawsuit. He's been ordered to participate in the damages phase. He still has a contempt warrant out for him, and he's serving his famous Bundy beef for all and any to eat tonight on the Emmett homestead, where you're also invited to bring your sleeping bag, by the way, because he's opening up the orchard for campers to keep possible law enforcement impediments in place. We don't know. Somewhere, T Swift's song Anti-Hero is playing unironically, I'm sure. We did reach out to the Gem County Sheriff's Office to see if they plan to show up for the feast tonight. You can insert your goose is cooked joke here, but we have yet to hear back. An assist is usually a highly honored stat in sports, although its definition varies depending on that sport. For example, in basketball, an assist is awarded to the player who passes the ball to the player who scores. In soccer, it can be accidental, and in hockey, it can be more than one player. It can be two players. Okay, so that word and how it is defined is the focus of a Planned Parenthood lawsuit against Idaho's Attorney General Labrador. The lawsuit was filed after a letter to the AG, or after a letter the AG wrote, I should say, to a member of the state legislature became public back in March. And that letter, which Mr. Labrador claimed wasn't an opinion, claimed Idaho doctors who refer patients for any out-of-state abortion procedure would be breaking the law. Planned Parenthood says that letter threatens doctors and violates the First Amendment's protection of free speech. Andrew Bartline listened in on this hearing today. Andrew, so we want to know what both sides were arguing today, and was anything settled today?
Not exactly in terms of getting a definitive answer, but of course, those steps are now going in motion after hearing those arguments. The AG's office has to get some papers filed to the judge. Those are due Thursday. So at the very earliest, we'll see if this holds ground Friday or sometime next week for this lawsuit and those arguments. And to understand these claims fully, we have to follow along on a paper trail. And what's important, again, that word assist is taken specifically from Idaho's abortion laws and quoted directly by Mr. Labrador in that letter. So here's the original letter. It's from March this year. In it, Mr. Labrador explains to Representative Brent Crane, Idaho law prohibits an Idaho medical provider from either referring a woman across state lines to access abortion services or prescribing abortion pills for the woman to pick up across state lines. The AG arrives at this interpretation or opinion based on Idaho's abortion laws language, which says professional licenses should be suspended or withdrawn on multiple offenses for doctors who assist in performing or attempting to perform an abortion. So you catch that again, the word assist. The AG's office says referring a woman across state lines for an abortion would constitute an assist and therefore is illegal. That's the crux of this lawsuit that Planned Parenthood has filed against the AG's office. The lawsuit's a 20-page document, but it boils down to two things. Planned Parenthood says the AG's opinion violates free speech protections and it illegally aims to enforce Idaho's laws outside Idaho borders. But the larger problem here is that Idaho State Legislature passed amendments to the state's abortion laws earlier this last session, I should say. Essentially, House Majority Leader Megan Blanksma sponsored a bill that changes how the prosecution works. It's the affirmative defense clause. Long story short, abortions in Idaho are considered innocent until proven guilty now. After Governor Little signed the bill, House Bill 374, the AG's office then released a second letter. It's an effort to take back what Mr. Labrador wrote in his first letter. The AG's office wrote in an email today, the law was enacted and the amendment of the existing statute by House Bill 374 vitiates the question of law. It renders the letter void. So none of this matters then, right? The law changed, the AG took back his opinion. Well, maybe not, because the language the AG used to justify his opinion in that original letter, that word assist, it's still in the new law. It's written exactly as it was in the original law. So if referring a woman to get an abortion was illegal before in the AG's mind, Planned Parenthood's asking, why would it change now if the language around an assist is unchanged itself? Planned Parenthood's attorney says the AG's office wants to have their cake and eat it too. They took back the letter, but they have not announced that the opinion in that letter was wrong, meaning they want to maintain those benefits of a chilling effect.
There was confusion after the initial letter was issued, and then there was even more confusion after it was purportedly withdrawn. And so the physicians that I've talked to besides our client, they don't know what to do, and that's scary for them. So we're really just looking for clarity here from the court.
The AG's office argued in return there's no threat and no grounds to sue the Attorney General's office because the AG does not specifically prosecute cases like this. It would be the individual county prosecutors, where the AG's office would typically offer assistance. Further, the AG's office says this letter was a personal and privileged communication, I guess attorney-client privilege
Right.
with a member of the state legislature.
But isn't it also in that law that the AG has the authority whether or not the county prosecutor is going to prosecute anybody in this case?
Sorry, say that one more time?
So in that law, there was a stipulation that the Attorney General could take on this case instead of relying on a county prosecutor to prosecute anybody who violates this law. Is that still in there?
I'm not exactly positive about
Okay.
that. That's actually something we should touch on at the end of the show. We'll check on that.
Okay, we'll check on that. That's one of the questions I had. I wish I'd asked you that earlier. All right, thank you very much, Andrew. KTVB's platinum anniversary coming up this summer in July, but 30 years ago, in July of 1993, you know what we were getting ready for? The sesquicentennial celebration of the Oregon Trail, and KTVB was getting ready for that celebration by premiering a brand new show called Exploring Idaho, a show they hoped would inspire 1990s viewers to do some exploring of the state of their own. Well, we've dusted off a few of these old episodes over the last few weeks to highlight some of the things Idaho's News Channel 7 has done during its 70 years of broadcasting. In that first episode, the crew took us to some of the historical spots along the 580-mile Idaho stretch of the Oregon Trail, including sections where the wagon ruts are still showing, where, as Dee Sarton put it 30 years ago, you'd swear the dust had just settled.
To our modern eyes, this looks like a harmless, meandering river, and these are just gently rolling hills. But to a family getting ready to cross the Idaho leg of the Oregon Trail, these were dreaded obstacles. Thomas Fork with its steep bank and soft bottom, then the long and tedious climb up the big hill.
When I was a little kid, I could always imagine these wagons coming up over these hills. I could almost feel the spirit of them coming up here.
It was a spirit of determination. Maven Sparks calls it gumption. He knows about all there is to know about the Oregon Trail. Remember these steep banks? Maven says this was the inspiration for an early days toll bridge.
As I understand, they went and got two big logs and laid across, and they'd roll the wheels across on these two logs. And they charge $1 a wagon to cross it.
A lot of money in those days. But one of the few treats of the Oregon Trail was free and just ahead, Soda Springs. Here, immigrants could enjoy carbonated spring water that some said tasted like beer. But for the real thing, weary pioneers looked forward to a stop at the Fort Hall Trading Post. This replica near Pocatello gives you an idea of what it was like when thousands of immigrants sought rest and supplies. One of the amazing things about the Oregon Trail is its ability to feed your imagination. Spend a few minutes reading the names of immigrants at Register Rock. At this point, they'd traveled over 1,000 miles, covering just 20 miles on a good day. Lyle Woodbury owns his own Oregon Trail memories. The trail passes smack dab through his ranch near Burley. The axle grease that pinned this graffiti had staying power.
Williams, Siemens, July 5th, 1849.
This summer, Lyle will open his ranch to the public. You'll be able to see for yourself this bit of history that just keeps unfolding.
We were over here on this butte last week, and we found a stretch of the Oregon Trail.
As you can see, the Oregon Trail never gets old to the folks who live in these parts.
We're walking right where the wagons went. You can just imagine what it'd be like to bounce up over all these rocks with an iron-tired wagon and not know where you was going or what was ahead of you.
But this summer, people are going to try it again. This is Idaho's official sesquicentennial wagon. It will cross Idaho in a border-to-border trek across the old Pioneer Highway. Bud Allen has become an expert on the Oregon Trail. He lives near Three Island Crossing, considered the most dangerous river crossing for Oregon Trail pioneers. Bud says this official wagon is a beauty, equipped with a luxury option.
This is just typical country that those people had to come across, and it isn't smooth. This wagon has got springs on the seat, and a lot of them that come across probably wouldn't have had.
As a matter of fact, most people walked rather than put up with the constant jolt of a springless wagon.
This is a bolt that's used on an iron-tired wagon to help hold the rim onto the wooden wheel.
More evidence of the bumpy ride. Bert Silcock says you can find amazing artifacts along the trail just a few miles southeast of Boise. Take these old solder-top cans, for example. They're everywhere. The pioneers weren't worried about littering. Obviously, they had more important things on their minds, like getting to the Boise River.
As you come off of Bonneville Point, there's 6 or 7 different trails where they were coming off together as a kind of a company front, because they were trying to get out of the dust, out of the wind, and get to the water.
Bert is the wagon master for this summer's sesquicentennial wagon train. You'll be able to see wagons heading over this hill for Boise toward the end of July. They're even inviting you to go along on this historic event. The entire trip will give modern-day Oregon trekkers just a taste of what it took to blaze the Western Trail 150 years ago, when looking out over the vast and rugged West was easy on the eyes, but hard on the body and soul.
I have a lot of feeling of admiration for these people that had gumption enough to come out here and do this.
How people ever had the fortitude to stand this trip, I'll never know.
Sadly, all the people interviewed for that story have since passed. They've even put an end to the 3-island crossing that usually they held every year in Glens Ferry. A little too dangerous. But you can still visit most of the places they mentioned. You know, we've been sharing these Exploring Idaho stories over the last few weeks. The beauty of the Bruneau Dunes, the importance of the World Center for Birds of Prey, the year of record water over the Shoshone Falls. But what about how those stories made it from inception to reception on Southern Idaho antennas nearly 30 years ago? Well, today we thought we'd share the origin story of Exploring Idaho as told by the two people who were tasked with taking you there.
The beginnings of art.
The first story I ever did was Idaho's Native American rock art.
Thousands of years ago, the people who lived here etched their traditions and their visions into rock.
That story, in October of 1994, began a 4-year run for the Exploring Idaho team of producer-reporter Jennifer Eisenhart.
We did that snow machining one. When was that?
And photographer Bill Crum.
That was, but you wrote it, but
Yeah.
At the time, Jennifer was producing Idaho at 5.
For complete coverage, turn to News Center 7, Idaho's news channel.
Oh, I immediately wanted to produce Exploring Idaho, and I immediately started being like, hey, do you need any help on that show? I think I immediately started talking to you.
And I immediately recognized her potential for being a fantastic producer and writer. Aww. And so I started pestering the news director. Eventually I got her, I snagged her.
So Jennifer jumped to join Bill full-time.
I think it was actually in '95 when I started.
Yeah.
Who'd been part of getting Exploring Idaho off the ground.
I just wanted to share the beauty of Idaho with our viewers. I really felt a huge responsibility to do it right.
And together, they did, traveling for 2 weeks out of every month, digging up stories. Then they'd spend the next 2 weeks putting them together.
I felt like we had the best jobs in the station.
Yeah, it was a dream job.
Yeah, it was awesome. It was a great job, but it was really physical. You know, you're wanting to shoot in the early morning light and sunset light, and so you're having really long days and
back paddle.
So it was challenging, but it was great.
Having experiences like that where you're just being eaten by mosquitoes or you're hiked for miles, but we loved it because in the end you had this footage that you just were so proud to share.
Nearly 30 years later,
yeah, I just wanted to see if anything jumped out at me.
It's tough to remember the dozens and dozens of stories they've shared, but they have some favorites.
Dugout Dick was one of my favorites.
Yeah.
Dugout Dick was this...
This is a house right here, first house I made.
This old miner that lived in caves up near Salmon, Idaho.
He just had a mining claim, and as long as he kept chipping away at the back of his caves, he could maintain his claim.
See, I'm going to make a temple.
This is your temple?
This is the temple part of it, yeah.
One of my favorite stories was a profile on a still photographer named Steve Bly, who's just fantastic, world-renowned. That was one of the first stories that Jennifer and I worked on together. And we have a picture of us standing in the middle of a marsh in our wetsuits trying to stay warm in this swamp water. But it's my favorite picture because that brings back the memory of that day and, you know, to be able to follow around Steve and tell his story.
Yeah, it just happened. I thank God for it.
Yeah, we got to meet a lot of really interesting people that are out there doing amazing things.
Exploring Idaho, when I got here, I'd heard about this legacy and these shows and stuff like that. Do you guys ever think about like that footprint you left here at KTVB?
I remember when we were doing Exploring Idaho, we would regularly receive letters from people who were so happy that we were doing these shows because they used to get out and do all these things. There's generally elderly people.
Right.
They were so happy to be able to see Idaho and still experience these places through the shows.
You know, it holds a very dear place in my heart to have had that experience. So yeah, it's important to me.
which is why it's a big deal to Bill and Jennifer to see them again on TV and online.
I've been hoarding boxes of old TV videotapes in my garage for 20 years. My wife keeps saying, when are you taking those to the dump? Well, now I can because they already exist online.
You might have to wait the whole day for the right picture, but it's worth it.
Yeah, I'm really glad to see KTVB put the shows back up again, you know, because they're good shows. They stand up and not just about the show, but about Idaho and all these beautiful places.
Jennifer went on, along with her husband Tom Adzer, also a Channel 7 alum, by the way, to start their own production company, Wide Eye Productions. Remember the Emmy-winning Idaho the movie? That's them. And one of the photographers, editors who did that documentary, that would be Bill Crum, who now calls Jennifer his boss. Oh, how the turntables. All right. From now until our 70th anniversary celebration, we'll be showing a few of the Exploring Idaho stories right here on KTVB. But if you'd rather check them out now, you can watch all 6 years of Exploring Idaho on our KTVB YouTube channel. You just wait till after the show, too. Ah, yes, the seasonal staple in Idaho of sheep shutting down highways to make their way to the Boise National Forest for spring and summer grazing. Something sheep herders have done for more than a century, yet we still can't seem to get enough of these fluffy four-legged critters crossing Highway 55.
You guys, what did you see today? Sheep. What were they doing? What were they saying? We saw a post and we decided to bring the family on out and watch a bunch of sheep cross the road. We found out today that the sheep actually start off in Emmett. When they cross the major roads, if the weather is good, they stop the traffic, and we see, you say about 1,000 sheep today, and it was neat watching the dogs. Favorite part, just watching the kids enjoy the sheep walking down the road. and listening to them. I mean, it's almost like it's not deafening, but it's awesome just to hear the noises they make as they're transitioning from one side of the road to the other back into the country.
All right, before we get to your comments, I want to clarify. I asked Andrew a question about whether or not the AG has the right or authority to prosecute anybody when it comes to abortion over county prosecutors. I believe that's with the trafficking bill, the minor trafficking bill. I'll get some more clarification of that as we get into tomorrow, hopefully. All right, back to your comments. This one is about Ammon Bundy's barbecue tonight that's being held. Law enforcement, please don't go to the barbecue tonight. Please let discretionary caution rule Mr. Bundy's arrest in any circumstance, but especially tonight. No good will come from any kind of confrontation. All he does have to do is turn himself in. He doesn't need to do this. He can go in and turn himself in without having to serve any custody at all. Pay the bond and he's gone. So funny, Ammon Bundy is not only living in Brian Holmes' head, he hasn't paid rent forever. Another bill he owes.